We're in the bottom of Mem Zayin and Beis 47b.
Yeah.
1 second.
That's what we need.
Okay. Yesterday we were middle of a discussion with the debate between Rish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. If there's a biblical kinyan of kesef, if biblically speaking, according to Rabbi Yochanan, you can acquire items with kesef. It said the rabbis undid kinyan kesef, money, and instead they said you have to acquire the item because maybe the guy's stuff will get burnt, and the seller will not save it. If money works to acquire the item, so the buyer gives the seller money when the seller still has the item, the seller won't bother saving the buyer's stuff.
It's not his responsibility or
Exactly.
his property.
So therefore, the rabbis undid kinyan kesef. That's according to the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan. Kinyan kesef is money. According to Rish Lakish, there was never a possibility of money working for movable items. Money is not a valid kinyan.
So where are, I'm sorry.
So 47b, first of the wide lines, but halfway through the line. So it goes back to the first mission in Hazav. Tanam we learned Reb Shimon Aimer Kol Shakesef b'Yadai Yadai Alal Yaina. So Reb Shimon's talking about a debate of the sale between the seller and the buyer. And he says the critical component is who has the money. Whoever has the money, they win. They sort of win the argument. Now this certainly seems to imply, like Rabbi Yochanan. In other words, the seller could change his mind because he has the money. The buyer that's already given the money can't change his mind because he's already given the money. If you say that money is a kinyan, so that's why the seller can change his mind because money works as a kinyan. The buyer can't change his mind because he's already paid for the item. But if you say that money does not acquire an item, who cares who has the money? The real question is who has the item. And if the buyer never took the item, so then the buyer should be able to change his mind as well. So Gemara says, Rish Lakish concedes the point to Rabbi Yochanan, and he says that according to Rabbi Shimon, indeed it is the case that money works as a kinyan.
Page edition, Rabbi. 147b.
47b and fourth wide line.
Fourth wide line. Okay.
Fifth wide line, I'm sorry.
52nd. Right?
Fifth wide line. I'll leave it to Reb Shimon like him. No, according to Reb Shimon, you're right. Money does work as a kinyan. Kikeimna, my opinion is, I'll leave it to Rabbanan according to the rabbi's opinion. Gemara says, Bishlam Reb Shlagish, Hainu Dikabein Reb Shimon the Rabbanan. I understand, according to Reb Shlagish, the difference between Reb Shimon and the Rabbanan. El Reb Yochanan, my Dikabein Reb Shimon the Rabbanan. But according to Reb Yochanan, what's the difference? One second. Okay, so according to Rish Lakish, I understand that the debate here is whether or not money works as a kinyan or not. The rabbis say it doesn't work as a kinyan. Rav Shimon says it does work as a kinyan. That's according to Rish Lakish. That makes sense. According to Rabbi Yochanan, what's the debate? So the Gemara says, one second. Yeah. Okay. In other words, according to Rav Shimon, even generally speaking, the purpose of the decree was that. One second. Yeah. Was to be able to was to protect the buyer from the liability of the seller. Right, the seller's house burns down. And the question is, once they required Mashiach, do they allow it also as an excuse for the buyer to change his mind? And Rav Shimon says no. And the rabbis say, yeah. In other words, the rabbis say you need to do Mashiach. If you didn't take Mashiach is taking the item, pulling it. So if you didn't pull the item, you didn't do Mashiach. So then according to the rabbis, both sides, nothing happened. Both sides could change their mind, except that, well, so to say you get a punishment for breaking your words. Meaning, if you agree to buy something and you put money down, but you don't do Mashiach, then God will take revenge. You're allowed to change your mind, but you shouldn't. And both sides could change their mind, both the buyer and the seller. Shimon says only the seller can change his mind, not the buyer. The decree is very limited in scope. It's just so that the seller cannot exempt himself if his house burns down. That's basically the sum total of the decree. Okay. So Rav Shimon less Rav Chizda. Rav Shimon says that the decree was limited, not like Rav Chizda. He says it was limited just so that the buyer can't exempt himself in case of a fire. The Rabbanan Isla Rav Chizda, the rabbis say, no, you need to do Mashicha, because if you don't do Mashicha, then nothing happens. Both the buyer and the seller, technically speaking, have the right to change their minds. So now we learned. This is what I pointed out a second ago. Anyone who somebody who changes his mind, what do we say? We say the God that punished the generation of the Mabul, he will punish those that don't keep their word. Meaning not just don't keep the word, but don't keep the word because they've given money on it. And we'll discuss that point. So the Gemara says, if according to Rabbi Yochanan, there really is a kinyan with money. Money does acquire things. So it makes sense why you get the penalty. Because the truth of the matter is that really if the buyer gave the seller money, then the sale is executed. It's only the rabbis changed the law slightly. But it would make sense that because the original law was that the sale is valid, that's why you get this penalty if you change your mind. However, but if you say that there's no such thing as a kinyan kesef, you must do mashicha, so then why exactly do you get this penalty? You promise something, fine, but you didn't do anything to bring it into your possession. The money doesn't bring it into your possession. According to Rabbi Yochanan, it does. That's why you get a penalty. That makes sense. But if the money doesn't bring it into your possession at all, so then why do you get the penalty? Mishum dvar, because obviously it's because you committed. We'll soon see that a verbal commitment is not sufficient to get the severe penalty with what God punished the generation of the flood. Vatanya we learned from Shimon Aimer, Afbish Amr Talas Kaina Dinner Zav, the end dinner Zav Kaina Talas, Mikal Magam Kachalocha. 1 second. Vatanya, 1 second. Vatanya, Shimon Aimer, Afbish Amr Talas Kaina Dinner Zav, the end dinner Zav Kaina Talas. Okay, so the guy is buying a shirt, is exchanging a shirt for a gold coin. So now, in this context, the gold, even though it's usually a commodity, in this context would be currency. So if the buyer picks up the cloak, so then he gets the gold. But if the seller picks up the gold, he doesn't get the cloak, right? So if he doesn't get the cloak, so the seller takes the gold, but then the cloak isn't yet purchased because Chalipa doesn't work. Okay. Yet, if you change your mind, what happens? 1 second. Despite the fact that the rule is that if you picked up the gold, the transaction is not executed. You have to pick up the cloak, right? But they said, okay. So the God that punished the generation of the flood, the generation of the dispersion, the generation of Staim and Amira and the Egyptian at the sea, he will return fire to those who change their mind like this. Okay. However, okay, somebody who gives a verbal commitment, there's no kinyan at all, and if you change your mind, the rabbis don't like it. There's quite a difference there between don't like it and the God that paid back the generation of the flood, the dispersion, Staim and Amira and Mitzrayim. There's quite a gap there. But Rav explains, and Rava says basically we only understand that latter half, that the rabbis don't like it because it's verbal. Okay, so according to Rish Lakish, giving money is no different than a verbal commitment because there's nothing significant about giving money for a sale. There's no method of kinyan using that money. If that's the case, then according to Rish Lakish, this should be a verbal commitment, and a verbal commitment the rabbis don't like. But you don't get the same penalty that you would get according to Rabbi Yochanan if you gave money. So the Gemara says it depends what type of verbal commitment. In other words, a verbal commitment that has money attached, then you get the severe penalty. The God that paid back the flood, he'll return fire for someone who changes his mind after he's given money. But if it's a verbal commitment without money, so then the rabbis say we don't like it. But in a sense, the sale is still, it doesn't have the severity of the previous penalty. Okay. Amar Rava says, we have a pasuk and a brayso that support the opinion of Rish Lakish. Again, Rish Lakish says, kesef does not work. Money doesn't work. You have to do mashicha. You have to pull it. Okay. This is an interesting verse. It talks about a list of sins. Okay. And we'll soon see that there are 4 of them, I believe. There's Bipikoden, Tzumas Yad, Gezel, or Oshak. 4 things. Okay, so 2 of them are very easy. Gezel is a stolen item. Pikoden is an item that's entrusted to a watchman. That leaves us with 2 more complicated ones. One's called Oshak and one's called Tzumas Yad. We'll explain those in a moment. But those are 4. When the verse says that you'll get a penalty, it only talks about 3 of them. It talks about Gezel and Pikoden, stolen item and an item given to a watchman, and Oshak, which we'll explain in a moment. It doesn't mention Tzumas Yad. So let's explain. You know what a Pikoden is. Tzumas Yad will have to explain. Gezel is a stolen item. Oshak. We'll explain what that is. Tzumas Yad, what is it? Tzumas Yad. Okay, so the Gemara here takes as a general principle that when you lie under oath, the penalty is only given if you lie about an item that you actually own. So let's explain. When you borrow money, you don't, the lender does not own the money anymore. He owns a debt obligation, obviously, because you can spend the money. The same thing is true if you borrow anything that's spendable. The owner now gets a debt obligation. He doesn't get, you're not obligated to give back the exact same grains. Obviously, there's no purpose of a loan then. So therefore, when you deny a loan, you don't deny an item. You deny a debt obligation. However, there is a way to deny an item in a loan. What happened? They agreed to have a collateral. Okay, so what happened was here the borrower borrows $100, and he offers his wallet as a collateral, his credit cards, whatever, his license. Okay, but he didn't have a chance yet to give it over to the lender. So the borrower agrees that the license is a collateral, his driver's license is a collateral, but he didn't give it over to the lender. I'm sorry. And now he lies about the loan. So now he's not just lying about the loan, but he's lying about something that the lender actually owns, which is the collateral. As we'll see, that's the opinion of Rabbi Yitzchak. We'll get to it later in the Masechta. So in English, that means is that when you give a collateral for a loan, there's an actual ownership that the lender has over the collateral.
So how does he get that? Does he have to go through a lifting or?
Presumably, yeah.
Just for the
Presumably.
Collateral.
Just for the collateral, yeah. Certainly according to Shlokish. Okay. So what happens? So Tzumas Yad is you lied about a loan. How did you lie about a loan such that you get a penalty? Where there was a collateral, but the collateral wasn't yet given over to the lender. So specified wasn't transacted. Okay. Oshak, what's Oshak? Oshak means to withhold. How exactly did you do that? What happened was the guy hired laborers. He promised to pay them, and I guess he set aside some payment for them, some vessel, and then he said, "You know what? I'm not giving it to you," and he lied about the whole thing. So now again, he's lying about a vessel. You have to lie about a vessel to get a penalty. If you lie, you have to lie about something that you own to get a penalty. A debt obligation to your laborers is not a thing; it's a debt obligation. But if you have a thing, you told them you're going to give them a bar of gold or something, that's a thing, and you're lying about a thing now. Okay, what does the verse say? So the verse speaks about gezel, pekadin, and oishik. It doesn't mention tzumas yad. V'ilu tzumas yad lo yahadrei. It's not listed in the verse. My time, alav mishum demechser mashicha. Like Jules pointed out, how do you acquire the collateral? Mashicha. Through Mashicha. But over here, Mashicha wasn't done because the collateral wasn't moved from the borrower to the lender. So the collateral wasn't moved. Says Rish Lakish, there's no kinyan. If there's no kinyan, then there's no penalty because you didn't acquire the mashkin. That's why the verse says you lied about all these things, but you don't get the penalty for this one. Why? Because you didn't acquire it. Good.
Mm-hmm.
So Prabhupada says, 1 second. Let's say that Oishik and Hava, Oishik and Sumas Yad are very similar. Oishik again is withholding payment from a laborer. Sumas Yad is withholding a loan that has an item attached to it, a collateral. Maybe they're so similar that they're actually included under one rubric. So Torah doesn't need to repeat itself. So Gemara says, what's the scenario? It's like. So what happened was the Oishek is so he's pointing at as follows. What happened? The Oishek, the employer hired laborers, right? He promises them a brick of silver. Well, so Rav Papa is saying, 1 second, that brick of silver they never acquired either. How did the laborers get hold of the brick of silver? They never did Mashiach either. And yet the Torah still says they get a penalty. So maybe it's actually altogether one package. And Oishek means Tzumas Yad also, and actually proves Rabbi Yechanan's point, because they didn't do Mashiach, and the Torah still says you get a penalty. Because Oishek, even though the Torah doesn't mention Tzumas Yad and Oishek is one package. So really, the Torah is mentioning Tzumas Yad because it's together in Oishek. So he says to him, no. We can explain it very similarly. We can explain that they're distinct. Oishek, what happened? The laborers worked. He gave them the bar of silver. And then they gave him back the bar. They gave their employer back the bar to watch it. And now he lied about it. So now he actually did do a Mashiach. But Tzumas Yad is a scenario where he didn't do Mashiach. Okay, because of so the Gemara says Haina B'Kadin. Well, in that case, the obligation, the payment to the laborers, it's the same thing as a B'Kadin, as an item that's to be watched. So the Gemara says, you're right, Trey Gavin B'Kadin. It's two different types of items to be watched. One is an item that I gave you to watch, and the other one is I gave you my own payment to watch, the gold bar. Samar says, Samar says, well, if that's the case, let's say the same thing about it to Sumas Yad. Maybe the borrower gave his driver's license to the lender, who gave it back to the borrower to watch. And therefore, we would say that there was Mashiach that was done. So Gemara says, what do you mean? 1 second. Samar says, you're right. It could be that would be a case, and in that scenario, there wouldn't be a proof to Rish Lakish. However, at the end of the day, the verse only lists 3 of the 4. The most logical explanation for that is to make a distinction between the 4th and the other 3. And the difference is Mashiach. That's the most logical difference. Was the collateral acquired with Mashiach or not? If it wasn't acquired, there's no penalty because, like Rish Lakish, Mashiach, you need to do Mashiach. You don't do Mashiach, there's no penalty. And okay. That is the verse. And the Gemara says, "V'atanya Amr Shumi Nayalit Nis Amr L'Malamata D'Chsiv Oy Mikol Sheishav Olav L'Shekar V'Amr Nachman Amr Bavua Amr Rav L'Rabbeis Tzumas Yad Hishaven." Okay, Reb Shimon basically says that the laws of Tzumas Yad are identical to the laws of Oishek. So, well, we're trying to make a distinction here and saying that initially there are 4 and the end there are 3, and now Reb Shimon is basically saying that the 4 and the 3, it's really the same laws. So the Gemara says, you're right. Technically speaking, it is the same law. Because like we pointed out, there's a dramatic distinction between the case of the laborers and the case of the loan. The distinction is, did the workers or did the lender acquire the collateral? In other words, in the case of the loan, the lender did not acquire the collateral. In the case of the withholding payment from the workers did acquire the collateral. So there's no difference in law. It's just a difference in the scenario. So the Gemara points out, according to Reb Shimon, that they're basically identical, which the Gemara really concedes that they are. well, then there's no real proof in the verse. And the Gemara says yes and no. Yes, that they're identical in law, but no, ultimately speaking, the verse does differentiate 3 and 4. It talks about 4 people making an oath, but only 3 of them get the penalty. Why is this? It must be because of Mashiach. The Mashiach is the difference in the scenario. In law, it's true, they remain exactly the same. If the collateral is acquired with Mashiach, then you would make an oath and get a penalty. And if it wasn't acquired with Mashiach, you'd make an oath, but you wouldn't get a penalty. Okay. Good? Okay. Took you a lot quicker than it took you a lot quicker than it took me to get that Gemara last night. Okay. Masnisa minolan.
You gotta think about
It took me a lot longer than that. Okay, Masnisa minolan. What's the brisa? What's the brisa that supports the opinion of Rish Lakish? The Tanya we learned. Nosna labalan mal. Okay, so we're talking about Me'ila here. Me'ila is basically you had money that belonged to the temple fund, we call hektish, and you spend it. Okay, so when you spend the money, you violate the laws of hektish, and you violate a prohibition called Me'ila. You've misused temple funds. Now, as you figured out by now, well, 1 second, what does it mean to spend it? It means to do Mashiach on the item that's being acquired. Because like we said, Mashiach is constantly the subject matter here. Right, you need to do Mashiach. 1 second. Except if you give a bathhouse manager. Why? A bathhouse manager is the only one that by giving him the coin, you violate the laws of hektish. Because there's nothing for him to pull. What exactly is the bathhouse manager supposed to do? What exactly are you supposed to take from him? Jump in the pool? Not quite a taking. Now, we'll soon see that most other professions, there actually is a professional act that involves taking. For example, let's say you get a haircut, right? The barber takes the scissors to cut your hair. There's a taking. That's the Mashiach. So you have to wait. So if you give the barber the payment, but he didn't yet take his scissors, you don't violate the laws of hektish. Not until he took his scissors. But if you give a bathhouse manager, there's nothing to take, right? The bathhouse is hot. What exactly are you moving here? He's just authorizing you to dip in his bath.
Okay.
You hear the point?
Yeah, it's a funny one.
Okay. 1 second. 1 second. Okay, so this brisa clearly supports the opinion of Rish Lakish that biblically speaking, there's no violation until you do Mashiach. Because if biblically we would give significance to Kinyan Kesef, why would you need to wait for Mashiach? As there's no concern here about you stealing, about hektish stuff burning and you not being responsible about it. Right? So what you should violate as soon as you transact the money. It must be that this supports the opinion of Rish Lakish that there is no such thing as Kinyan Kesef. Okay. There is no such thing as Kinyan Kesef with regard to movable items. It's all dependent on Mashiach. The exception to that would be the Balon, the bathhouse manager, because there is no Mashiach possible. You can't take, there's nothing to take. Samara says, Vatanya Nasan Sapar Amal. If a guy gives a barber, there is Me'ila, but Sapar Habayla Mimshash Tasparis, the barber has to take the scissors. So the Gemara says, no, it depends on what type of barber it is. Okay, as we'll see, even according to Rish Lakish, a non-Jew does not have Mashiach, he does have Kesef. Non-Jews acquire with money, Jews acquire with Mashiach. So therefore, if you give the money to a non-Jewish barber, as soon as you give him the money, then you've closed the transaction. He doesn't have to pick up his scissors. And even Rish Lakish would agree to that. Tanya Nami Hachi, the Brisa supports this. This Brisa says that you give the money to a barber, or Safan is a captain of a ship, or to any other professional. You don't do Me'ila until they pick something up. Meaning they pick up the scissors. I presume the captain probably picks up the rudder or the sails. And the professional takes he takes the item. It's the craftsman takes the item he's supposed to be working on, and that's the taking. So Kasha, we have a contradiction. Does giving money to a barber suffice, or does he have to pick up his scissors? Does it not suffice until he picks up his scissors? Sikachna Da'adil Lav Shaminon, Kam B'Safar Nachar, Kam B'Safar Yisrael. Depends whether the barber is Jewish, then he has to pick up his scissors. If he's non-Jewish, then he does not need to pick up his scissors because a non-Jew doesn't have Kinyan Mashicha. He only has Kinyan Kesef. And then when you pay him the money, that's when you violate the laws of Hektish and you are a Moyel B'Hektish. Okay.
Why is this person running around with extras?
So there are a few reasons to that. First of all, it could be he's a trustee or something.
Oh, something like that.
But more simply, what I was thinking is that it could be he made a donation. He just didn't have enough time to actually bring it to the to the charity collection box.
Ah.
Yeah. Okay. Amar of Nachman. Vartara Mois Kaines. V'chein Amar Nachman. Vartara Mois Kaines. Abot Lev Masinim Ve'eshkach. So Rav Nachman basically agrees with Rabbi Yehudah that biblically speaking there is a kinyan of money, and Levi found a brisa to support him. What's the brisa? Nosna l'sitain. Okay, what's a sitain? Sitain is a wholesaler. This is how it works. Okay, this is how the wholesale business works in the Talmudical times. The wholesaler sells to small shops. The small shops agree on a purchase order. It's a large volume, and they give a small amount of money. That's a token payment. And this really introduces the next subject, which is the initial payment, the token payment. We'll have to get to this. And sort of a down, no, I would say down payment is probably a good way to put it. Yeah, a down payment is a good way to put it. I shouldn't say that. I'm not even sure what a down payment is. I don't want to use those words.
Okay.
I'm not sure what a down payment is. Yeah, well, because we'll see there's a major distinction here between a partial payment and between a partial payment and an initial payment.
Oh.
Okay, they sound very similar. They're not. A partial payment buys you a proportional amount.
Okay.
An initial payment buys you the whole thing. I don't know what in English a down payment means. I'm going to try to avoid using words that I don't know what they mean. So as initial payment, I presume initial payment is probably a full payment. It's an initial, a down payment is an initial payment.
Kind of like
Except with the condition that it's forfeitable.
Oh.
Right? Because typically if you don't go through the
right,
transaction, you
yeah.
forfeit the payment. Okay. So I would say it's a forfeitable initial payment. So this is they give the small retailers give the wholesaler an initial payment. It's supposed to represent the beginning of an entire big payment, which they'll get after they start doing their business. Okay, so what happens? National sitain mall. So they give this initial payment to the sitain. They violate the laws of Me'ilah. Okay, now
They get an initial payment
to the sitain, the wholesaler.
for the wholesale.
Now, 1 second here. They haven't yet, they give the payment and they violate the laws of Hektish. They haven't yet done Mashicha. And yet they violate the laws of Me'ilah. This clearly supports the opinion of Rabbi Yehudah, that technically speaking, Kesef is a valid kinyan, and therefore you violate the laws of Me'ilah. Al-Kash Rish Lakish, this seems to be difficult according to the opinion of Rish Lakish. So Rish Lakish, Hamani Reb Shimon, going back to the first thing we said today, Rish Lakish agrees that according to Reb Shimon, you violate the laws of Me'ilah. According to Reb Shimon, you violate the laws of Me'ilah. Money is a valid kinyan. At least technically. Even in practicality, the rabbis required Mashicha, they at least, according to Reb Shimon, they at least recognize that money is a good kinyan. Okay. The rabbi said God who paid back from the flood and the dispersion, he'll pay back on people that give deposits and renege from the commitment. So Itmar we learned. We notify him of this severe penalty. So if a guy gives a deposit, right, and then he wants to change his mind, we tell him, don't do it.
Can his reason for changing his mind be a mitigating circumstance?
Okay, so I have to double check it, but I actually am pretty sure in this scenario the answer is no. There's another scenario which is reneging on your words. Then it does make a difference. So verbal.
His kid needs an operation all of a sudden.
So if you have to, you have to. But I think you still get the penalty.
Okay, all right.
I
mean, there's a difference to getting a penalty and being sent express elevator down to Gehenna. If you have,
I think that if
you got to deal with.
So the general principle is that mechusar amana is somebody who lacks trust. Mechusar amana is where I gave you a verbal commitment and didn't follow through. That's when we say the circumstances could be mitigated. In English, that means that if there was a compelling reason for you to change your decision, and that you couldn't have known at the time that you gave the verbal commitment, then you're typically off the hook. You haven't even lost trust.
All I'm saying is, if the problem is if you gave a written commitment,
Written is the same.
Shouldn't the reason make a difference in terms of you have to
A-
pay
a written-
versus go to Gehenna?
A written is the same as a verbal commitment. If you transacted money,
Yeah, yeah.
then effectively the circumstances, you should treat it as if it's already too late. And now you're asking the guy to change his mind, to agree to undo it. You don't really have the ability, even under significant circumstances. Now, if you have to, you have to do it. You have to do what you have to do. If guy needs money to pay for his kid's surgery or something, presumably he should do that. But it doesn't change the fact that it's still a mishapar.
Okay.
The point of mishapar is because you basically sealed the deal.
Yeah.
Okay, so Rava says not only do you let him know what the penalty is, you curse him. You don't curse a Jew. Rava Amar Meilat Latinala, you do curse him. Why? Amongst his people. And the verse states in Svanya, She'eres Yisrael Yasu Avlav Leidabru Chazov. That verse will come up again in Bava Metzia. Basically, the remnant of the Jewish people, Lo Yasu Avla, they won't do harm, Leidabru Chazov, and they won't speak deceit. And this guy did harm and spoke deceit by basically paying for an item, agreeing to the sale, and then changing his mind. And therefore, he's not considered part of the Jewish people. With regard to the fact that you're able to curse him, that the penalty that happened to the floods should happen to him as well. Amar Rava. Rava says, Mina Amina law. How do I know this? Rav Chibar Yosef Yavli Zuzi Amilcha. Rav Chibar Yosef, he gave money to buy salt. L'seifa Yakar Milcha, the price went up. He wanted to change his mind. I guess he was selling the salt, so he wanted a better price now, right? So also came to Rav Yochanan. So he went to Rav Yochanan. Amalei Zil Havlu, go give him the salt. V'iloi Kibul Lechem Mishapara. If not, accepting yourself the fact that God is going to take revenge from you. Okay. If the purpose is to notify him, do you think that Rav Chibar Abba didn't know the law? Of course he knew the law. So why do you have to notify him? So the Gemara says, "Ve'elamai me'ad latinalei." So you actually curse him. Rav Chibar Yosef also the kabula l'tusid rabbanon. You think he's going to accept himself the curse of a rabbi? Okay, so this introduces the next Gemara, which we'll finish this Gemara, and then we'll leave the rest hanging for tomorrow. Okay, so what happened? What happened was there was a collateral. So he was the seller. Rav Chibar Yosef was the seller. He sold $1,000 worth of salt, let's say, okay, which was 1,000 pounds. And now the price of salt went up 50%. Okay, now the guy gave a down payment of $500. So Rav Chibar Yosef said, fine, I'll give you the 500 pounds of salt. And the remaining 500, which is now worth 750, right? I'll give you what is it? I'll give you 300 and something pounds. 300 was it 333 pounds for the rest of the salt, but I'm not giving it to you at the prices that I previously agreed to. So he said that the collateral was proportional, and Rav Yochanan said no, the collateral was an initial payment, and therefore it's the whole thing that he secured. The whole thing has a mishapara. You can't renege even on the full 1,000. And tomorrow we'll kick off with, we can see the first line here. We have this debate here. Itmar Erovan, a collateral. Rav Amar Kenegdi Hukaina, Rav Yochanan Amar Keneged Kulei Hukaina. Rav says that a collateral is proportional. The down payment basically is proportional to the down payment is proportional. The transaction is sealed in proportion to the down payment. If the down payment was half, then you seal 50% of the transaction. And Rav Yochanan says no. Down payment is an initial payment and it seals the whole transaction. And that will kick off that debate. We'll start with that tomorrow.